The fence is nearly complete, just one gate left to do. At this point, I have drilled and installed 36 fence posts with the county line post hole digger. So I thought what I'd do in this video is show you how the post hole digger is holding up, and then give you some of my thoughts and perspective on operation and in general the use of the post hole digger.
Having drilled 36 holes, this is what the auger looks like. You can see that the tooth here is worn down on the outer edge, particularly from grinding against some rocks in the holes. Inner edge isn't so bad. This tip, still in pretty good shape. That's just a little bit of surface rust on there from getting rinsed off. And then the edge of the auger is ground up and roughed up a bit from hitting rocks and getting rocks between the auger flights and the edge of the hole. But otherwise, it's held up pretty well. Coming up top by the gearbox, I have had a couple issues. I actually, without noticing it, had one of these nuts back itself off, loosen up. This thing does shake and vibrate quite a bit in operation. So I lost a nut, I had to go get a replacement. The other thing is the two nuts up in the top here that hold this shield up to the gearbox. Those loosened as well. I lost one of those and I had to go buy a replacement. That's a metric bolt, whereas this is a standard 1/2-inch bolt. So do pay attention if you're using one of these to the tightness on the bolts and the hardware. If I had been checking more often on whether or not things were tight, I may not have actually lost those and had that issue. When lowered all the way down to full depth, there is a little interference between the control handle and then the yoke here at the 3-point. You can see where it contacts and rubs. The other thing I've had happen is when you get fully down and then you go to lift up, sometimes that control handle catches underneath that pin and causes issues. I have had this tab here where the control handle connects to the gearbox. This little plate actually did bend a little. I have bent it back. So just little things to watch for. The handle isn't, necessarily really necessary, but it does help getting things straight when you first start a hole. Another thing with this, if I could have tightened up those turnbuckles to take the slack out of the 3-point hitch, I would have. There's a lot of sway here, which is great when you're brush hogging, but it's not great with this because this wants to then jump around, or it has the ability to jump around back and forth as you're drilling into the ground. So the way to deal with that, of course, is to tighten up those turnbuckles. They just happen to be seized up here on this tractor. Many newer tractors have an easier adjustment with bars and pins instead of these turnbuckles. So that would be a nice feature with this.
In terms of operation for the post hole digger, what I found works really well is to start out reducing the flow control on the 3-point to almost shut all the way down. Now that's usually a knob right under the tractor seat, and if you turn it all the way off and you put your position control for the 3-point down, your 3-point hitch won't actually lower. If you open that up just a little bit, it will lower very, very slowly, and that helps to give control with using the auger, so that instead of the auger just pulling straight into the ground, drilling down straight into the ground, it actually rotates and cuts and then removes the cuttings from the hole, bringing them up the flights of the auger a little bit better. Second thing that I found worked really well, tractors will always suggest that there's a certain engine RPM for achieving 540 RPMs at the PTO, which is your standard PTO RPMs. On the Ford 1700 that I have, that's at 2500 engine RPM, gives you 540 out the PTO, and that's also going to give you your full PTO rated power. Now, I found that running the engine at only 1100 to 1200 RPM gave much better control. It slowed down the post hole digger, and it just made everything more controllable in terms of advancing the hole slowly. It reduced the amount that it was jumping around. So I feel like using the low RPMs was fine. The tractor in general was producing plenty of power before that, with the exception of encountering a rock. At the low RPMs, I did bind up on rocks a couple times and end up stalling the engine, which isn't ideal, but I felt like the control that I had was better than running at higher RPMs. The other thing with the gear drive tractor like the Ford 1700 is that if I needed more power, if that engine started to lug a little bit because it was binding up in the hole, I had two options available to me, and the more holes that I put in, the better I got with kind of finding the balance between these. Option one is to hit that foot pedal throttle and increase the RPMs a little bit to give a little bit more power to the post hole digger. So oftentimes that would allow me to power through something or back off and start raising the 3-point hitch so that things didn't bind up and stall the tractor. Option number two, since it has a transmission driven PTO with an internal overrunning clutch, is just to hit the clutch. Stomping on the clutch stops the PTO and therefore stopped the auger and could prevent an engine stall. So those were the options available to me with respect to not stalling the tractor. Next, when I was drilling the holes, what I found works well as a strategy, at least with the gear drive tractor, in the sandy loam soils with rocks that I'm dealing with. I was dealing with rocks from, anything that's kind of your gravel size of about 1 inch up to, apple size to even cantaloupe sized rocks in this particular soil. So what I found works well, given how dry it's been, was that I would drill down a ways, say a foot. I would then hit the clutch pedal to stop the PTO, raise the 3-point hitch up to remove the auger from the hole, and then I would pop the clutch and spin the auger, which would then throw the cuttings off the auger. So instead of keeping the auger continually spinning, I would actually stop it so that I could take the scoop of soil up, which allowed less soil to fall back down into the hole. The other thing is I would then lower it back down into the hole without the auger spinning so that it wouldn't be trying to wiggle around and then overcut the hole even more. Just because I was hitting rocks and debris and the soil was so dry, and with the bounce around with the 3-point hitch because I don't have tight enough sway control on it, the hole was overcut anyway. So my 9-inch auger was making a 12-inch plus hole. A little unfortunate, but it did help alleviate some issues associated with verticality of the hole itself. So again, I found myself cycling down, stepping on the clutch, raising the 3-point, and then popping the clutch to spin off the auger. Finally, I did find that the stand that came with the post hole digger was quite helpful when I removed the post hole digger from the tractor. So I was able to put the legs onto the stand, and then I set the post hole digger down on the stand and the auger. When I did that, the weight basically came off the lower link arms on the 3-point. So I was able to pull the pins and just with my foot kick them off the yoke. And then the post hole digger was standing on the legs, and there was a little bit of weight on the main boom which attaches to the top link point on the tractor. So what I had to do was just lift on that main boom a little bit to alleviate the pressure on the pin at the top link point. I was able to slip that pin out, and then that main boom set down to the floor and was part of the stability in terms of standing up of the 3-point auger. I was then pretty easily able to slide the post hole digger up against the front wall in the garage, and it stores and tucks out of the way pretty nicely. So overall, it is a little bit of a cumbersome attachment to use. It does vibrate a bit. There is a little bit of nuance to operating it between just the attachment itself and the soil conditions that you're encountering. But again, just to sum up, I found that running at lower RPMs worked well, because I could always increase RPMs via the foot pedal throttle or hit the clutch if I needed to stop things, to prevent a stall out. And just working slowly with the 3-point flow control dialed way down so it lowered really slowly, making sure to clean out the hole as I progressed. And I didn't have any issues with the post hole digger getting stuck down the hole or really binding up or anything like that. So overall, for the price point and the amount of labor that it took to install these 36 posts, I'm pleased with the purchase. I couldn't have dug all these holes, particularly given some of the heat that I was working in. So that attachment was really a lifesaver in terms of finishing this project in a reasonable amount of time. So if you're trying to put up a fence, you got to put in a number of fence posts. It could be a labor-saving investment that's worthwhile. For my applications, the 3-point mounted, inexpensive county line post hole digger worked very well.